Okay, I'm continuing on with my look back and reflection on the design work I did on Troops in Contact, or TIC, a small unit combat action contemporary simulation simulation game. I sat down here to talk about, or to begin with movement. I wanted to talk about movement, but I also note that my little record here shows that I already talked about movement. So if that's the case, I'm considering movement again. So I've been mulling it over some more, and I think the ideas are good enough for testing. I think, and the movement I had last year was pretty standard squad level hex encounter. Fixed movement allowance, increased for running, paying terrain costs, movement point costs, having winded and tired. Just something dissatisfying about that whole system. I think maybe what I'm finding dissatisfying about that traditional system is that it encourages a lot of finite attention. Is that right? Finite attention. It encourages very close observation on the part of the player, finite decisions, and as well running calculations that to me seems out of place with movement, right? Movement should be fairly simple. You get up and move. Kind of like what I am trying to do with fire. I don't want the mechanics for firing to be especially time consuming and calculation heavy when you're just opening fire. You're just opening up. You're pulling a trigger. Anyways, so the idea with movement is this, and I think when I said I think I have enough to play test, I want to take a few concepts that work together. The first concept is what I would call real movement rates. This might be a throwback to an earlier era, and that's fine with me. It's not really my intent. I mean, it's not a deliberate intent. But okay, to start off with, squads will cover real distances on the ground given time. So right now, in game terms, a unit that moves from its current hex will cover anywhere from 25 meters up to, and this is what I'm considering, whether I'm going to go to 300 meters or 400 meters per 1 minute action cycle. 400 meters is I'll probably wind up going with 300, but I'm still looking at whether I can't push it to 400. This is the idea that a unit's ability to cover ground is defined by physical limitations. This is huge. Okay, this works together with, a whole new concept. I did not have this at all before, but I'm going to introduce it now, and I think I'm going to go with organizational losses or hits, if you will. Basically, to imagine this, a unit gets up from its position and it moves at a slow to moderate pace through, let's say, wait, no, it will matter. Okay, so it gets up and it moves through the open. Well, actually, I should say if it moves anywhere from a slow walk to a brisk walk, that should be, that should be 2, 3, or 4 hexes through open terrain. Again, these are not values, these are not values pulled off the top of my head, and these are not values that are made in order to make the game mechanics work. Okay, this is based on a 50 to 55 meter pace per minute for a slow to moderate walk, and a 100 to 110 meter pace for a brisk walk. Okay, all that with 25 meter hexes can nicely be broken down into 2, 3, or 4 hexes. And walking 2, 3, or 4 hexes, I almost feel like I should be dealing with distances now. So moving 50, 75, or 100 meters in a minute, a unit's just fine. There is nothing unusual, nothing different. Once that unit moves certainly to 150, 175, or 200 meters in a minute, it is doing something like a light run. So first of all, the next concept, if I can put it in a nutshell, is a unit will lose organizational integrity. I'll just simplify it to you. It'll lose organization, but I mean organizational integrity. I mean organizational coherency, organizational cohesion. But I'll just simplify it to the unit will lose organization when it gets up to that light run, moderate run, light run rate. And that's even in perfectly open terrain. So the distance covered by a unit per time, so rate or speed, I think speed's fine. Distance over time, over time. The speed of a unit's movement will automatically hit the unit in organization loss of organization. I'm not sure if it's no, actually there is a third principle, which I'll talk about next. So this is really important in game terms. The loss of organization will impose some type of penalty on the effectiveness of that unit's fire, and of course it will influence its ability to receive enemy fire. Now, understand, I don't know why I need to say this. I need to say this to remind myself. These penalties I'm talking about, I'm trying to keep them modeling reality. These penalties are not meant to be the type of designer penalties. I'm talking about let me talk about this. The whole concept and the whole reason why I'm going in this direction, one of the important reasons why I'm going in this direction, is that I'm actually going through the design and I'm trying to get rid of a certain type of design approach. So before I was trying to get rid of, okay, if something is designed for effect, then figure out what the cause is and make the rules reflect the cause more than the effect. Okay. Now I'm going through and I'm trying to get rid of all rules that are there that are supposedly, I call them like behaviorist rules. It's where the designer is imposing a rule that sole purpose is to prod players to act in a realistic way, even though there could be another way of approaching this. But that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, for example, the big one is firing. And I know I'm talking about movement, but jump back to fire. Even last year, in earlier iterations of this design, I had the idea of unlimited reaction fire. Unlimited reaction fire. And I had in my mind the same idea that I think other designers have. Well, I know other designers have expressed it. Okay, I'm going to prod players to not bum rush defenders, which is not realistic. But I'm gonna make this behavior. I'm gonna prod this behavior by basically creating an unrealistic ability of the defender to fire as if there were no time or let alone any other limit. Like limitless fire for the defender in that case, only to prod players to not bum rush. And so I've done away with that. I better have. That was my intent. My intent is there's not going to be unlimited defender fire anymore. Because why? Because I don't like that concept of rules inserted just to, again, force certain patterns of behavior that the designer thinks are appropriate. Instead, if you want to bum rush a defender, that defender has the option to go to max rate of fire, which means that it will be, yes, it will be very lethal, it will be very deadly, but it will also probably run out of ammunition and have other sorts of issues. So again, there is no unlimited reaction fire anymore because it's not realistic. So now back to movement here. A unit moves, let's say, down a suburban, I shouldn't use that. Moving in an open field, is moving at a moderate walk. It maintains its organization completely. No issue. It speeds up to a light run or moderate run. It's going to lose organization. And that organization is going to make it harder for the unit as a whole to operate as a whole. I have to emphasize that I'm trying to make these penalties not be, so this is kind of back to what I'm kind of getting at. I don't want to create or kind of ramp up the penalties just to encourage players to not run everywhere. The rules should not make running an automatically really dangerous activity. Now, having said that, now what I am trying to create is the situation where a player can choose. Well, first of all, a player can choose to sacrifice organization for speed. And what I am looking for is that, okay, so if a unit is moving through the open, let's say is running through the open and then runs into a wooded area. So now the speed is imposing an organization hit. And now running into the woods isn't that interesting? I was thinking that the woods would impose a loss of organization as well, but actually that may not be necessary if woods already have effect on observation, fields of fire, and cover. Then maybe it's not necessary to add another layer for, okay, I'm gonna have to look at that. Okay, but tentatively what I had was some terrain would also impose loss of organization. That is really interesting. I'm gonna have to look at that. Okay, but anyways, imagine a unit runs into a wooded area. If that unit ran into a prepared defender, on the one hand, it would essentially be a massacre. On the one hand, I mean, probably the only thing that would save that unit partially would be whatever cover the woods gave. But other than that, it would be a massacre. So how could that even happen? Of course, you can have hidden units and stuff, but I'm thinking maybe I can get around that by having reaction movement. And I actually think I need to integrate reaction movement. I can't even remember if I had that before or not. Okay, so the point is the player can take a unit and act with it in a way that it sacrifices organization, that creates vulnerabilities and penalties, and incidentally, the loss of organization would this loss of organization, I'm thinking off the top of my head, I think that these would always be non-permanent, and in most cases, if not all cases, this loss of organization, basically that comes from movement and terrain, would be temporary, very brief, i.e., okay, imagine a unit again. Let's now imagine a unit runs at a full run rate, and I think I calculated the other day, covers 300 meters in a 1 minute action cycle. 300 meters. This unit will have, relatively speaking, lost a lot of cohesion. I was using cohesion earlier. Would have lost a lot of organization. A lot of organization. Actually, at the moment that they stop running, it's not a unit, it's just a group of individuals. It will have really effectively lost a lot of organization. However, it's really only any 15-second action. I'm thinking any 15-second action period following the organizational loss is gone. It doesn't take long for soldiers to get down into fighting positions, establish eye-to-eye contact, maybe even squad radio contact, figure out what's going on, examine fields of fire. It doesn't take a lot. So the point is, even if a unit takes, effectively speaking, a huge organizational loss due to, again, movement and terrain, units can recover this really quickly. These aren't lingering organizational losses. Okay. The third concept that works together here is that there's basically three kinds of terrain. There's basically open terrain that does not impose organizational losses. Organization losses, not organizational. Loss of organization. Organization hits, organization losses. And then there's kind of slow going terrain that that's why the terrain will impose organization losses, because even if a unit is walking at a moderate rate through the open, taking no organization hits, and then walks into a wood line, well, maybe a wood line isn't, no. Some wood lines will, actually I can imagine some wood lines, if they were thick, would, so it depends on the terrain. Okay. All right. So going into a stone building, going into thick woods will cause organization losses separate from just the speed of the unit. Okay. All right. But anyways, so there's terrain that imposes organization losses. And then there's a third category of terrain, which maybe we call difficult terrain. This is terrain that it basically requires negotiation. So we're talking climbing a high wall or something like that. It requires something like a random check to negotiate, to pass, or some kind of fixed time cost to negotiate. Okay, working with these principles together, what I'm trying to get at is, one, players can move their units according to physical capability, not the design for effect. I know I'm skipping a lot here, but the movement rates that are based on design for effect are, at least in part, based on a unit. Basically, the designer assumes the unit wants to maintain its cohesion, its formation. So that's why it will slow down in certain terrain. Whereas I'm saying, if it's physically capable for the unit to race through that terrain, I want to give the player the option to race through that terrain, but then the rules will handle that unit's loss of organization, which is a loss of its formation, communication, so on and so forth, situational awareness, etc. Okay. All right, so what I want to create is players can move units according to physical capability, which necessitates units having some type of measure of their organization. Okay, so, oh yeah, and to balance this, of course I have to balance this. What is going to prevent players? I know, it's even in my own mind, what prevents players from deliberately being like mad dash players, i.e., as they're playing, they're looking for opportunities and taking every opportunity to have units racing around at max speed, seizing objectives, charging into the enemy's rear area, basically units operating like all-knowing electrons racing around the battlefield. What do you do about that kind of somewhat unrealistic view? First of all, one of these things goes back to scenario design. I basically, if I can remember, I want to steer clear of what I will call the capture the flag type scenario where, you win by just entering a hex or whatever. So that just encourages the kind of, again, the mad dash play style. I want to do a lot more than that. Second, some type of reaction movement, so that if you want to run way out in a flanking maneuver, running through a wood line to fall on a unit's rear, for example, there's a very real option, a very real opportunity, maybe not automatic, but a very, very real opportunity that the opponent will be able to take an unengaged unit and do a reaction movement where it's basically going to run right into you, and you're going to be running, and you're going to be very vulnerable, and you're basically going to be wiped out, essentially. So you want to run all the way around the the objective. There's a possibility. It's not automatic, though. I don't want. This isn't the unlimited fire concept. Okay. One of the things that this is going to, I think, hopefully promote is keeping a reserve, keeping units unengaged for exactly this purpose. But still, an option to do reaction movement. I have to look at that. And also the other thing is, okay, units have the ability to race around, but maybe every scenario has some provision for the arrival of offboard units. So again, you want to race all the way around the objective, but then you're going to sit, 100 meters short, or no, let's say you're going to race all the way around the objective, get in the enemy rear area, and then you're going to sit through 250 meters away from the objective so that you can recover, and then you can advance onto the objective from the rear. While you're doing that, maybe that could be a decision that has to be made, knowing the possibility that an enemy unit would simply come onto the board and hit you basically from the rear, let's say. As a matter of fact, it's almost like the rules for that, the possibility of that could almost be triggered by you moving to that part of the board. So in other words, if you get into the enemy rear area, that actually lets the opponent start rolling for a reinforcement. That's just thing off the top of my head. I may not go that. I don't know. I might find that too gamey later, but something about that. But if a player wants to do that, I want to allow it. I would like the rules of firepower and the rules of posture, unit posture, and even the rules of observation make it so that this type of mad dash approach is generally too dangerous. Generally, we will see. Okay, so indirect fire. This is going to be easy. I'm very, very happy with the indirect fire rules from the old SPI game Firefight. I think they're very good. I think that they're doctrinally rich in artillery doctrine of the time. What was that, late 70s, mid 70s? Actually more like mid 70s. What I like about it is that there are realistic plotting times. There are different kinds of missions. So to make this real easy, first of all, as of right now, I think there has to be plotted fire. I don't see any way around it. I still, well, I don't know what I can do with onboard markers, but at least in my own playtesting, I will use plotted, written fire plots. The other big thing is that with indirect fire is there will be, the rules will cover the distinct phases. So there's a plotting phase, and I don't mean phase like in a sequence of play phase. I'm talking about like a real world phase. You have to go through plotting, then you have to make contact. You have to make contact with the asset that's firing. Then you have to communicate. I'm not saying that this is exactly how the rules are. I'm just saying, when I sit down to work on this again, a unit, bring the level up of abstraction way down. In a lot of games, in a lot of small unit combat action games, we've allowed indirect fire to be really way too much abstraction. So in an effort to bring down the abstraction, I mean, there has to be a real unit really capable of plotting a fire mission. Then there has to be contact with the firing asset. There has to be a communication of the fire mission. Then there has to be the fire. Then there has to be adjustment of fire. It's even too much of an abstraction for me to kind of put together first rounds, adjusting fire, and then fire for effect, putting that all together. And again, abstracting cannot be, certainly not at this scale and scope. So it has to be observing, plotting, communicating, transmitting, firing, and adjusting. There's quite a bit to it. There should not be, players should have, and I almost hate to say it, but players should have the reaction of, you know what, indirect fire is so much work, maybe I'm not going to rely on it. On the other hand, a player who's able to use it well should be head and shoulders above another who doesn't. Okay, close assault. My basic design approach is that I don't like treating close assault as something entirely different. It's okay if there's something there. Close assault is very, very close range fire, and that's how I want to treat it. The big things I think that I'm trying to capture are, one, and this is going to fly in the face of the entire history of small unit combat action games. It is difficult to get units into close assault. This is something that I'm not going to say no game captures, but I'm going to say so many games don't capture this at all. Too many small unit combat action games make it just really easy to just walk into close assault, and some games make it way too advantageous to do so. What I'm trying to capture is, and I think of it in kind of a chemical, I guess it is, in a kind of chemical, physical science kind of way. As you push a friendly unit against an enemy unit, the resistance that is, the resistance on your unit as you try to push it towards the enemy unit increases and increases at the closer your friendly unit gets to the enemy unit. There is basically a kind of repelling effect of pretty much any enemy unit against your unit. Now, once you get your friendly unit like within a really, really close zone or orbit, then the resistance falls away, because basically think of it as a do or die zone. Friendly units will be repelled. They will resist going into the do or die zone, the very, very close orbit around an enemy unit. Once, of course, it's in the do or die zone, then other things take over, and resistance isn't an issue anymore. That repelling effect. I may have explained this really poorly, but I know what I'm talking about, and I know this is what I want to capture. It's going to be, players have to work to get units into close combat, close assault. Once they're in close assault, it's a massive amount of point blank fire, basically, and well, a unit. Well, I don't want to jump ahead to kind of say that certain results should be typical. I'll hold back on that. When you talk about the lethality of close combat, I'm going to start with the basic assumption of most of the units involved are firing at rapid, if not cyclic, rates. And we'll go from there. I mean, that alone should be awfully lethal. Okay, that's close assault. I can't really think of anything too much other than that. But it's going to be huge that the idea that a 6 to 15 minute small unit combat action game scenario has like a half a dozen close assaults is kind of yeah, I don't think so. Close assault should be something that is not typical, but when it happens, it's pretty decisive. Communications. This is another topic that I think I'm only really thinking through recently. I don't think I did a lot on this last year at all. Communications is something that right now I feel like it needs to be included, but I'm not going to ramp up the effects just because it's included. Basically, you have all this communication going on in a small unit combat action. What are the effects of well, first of all, let me say that typically we're talking about momentary, and in some cases really fleeting breaks in communication, loss of communication. And so what is the cumulative, or what is the overall effect of that? I think it's only slight delays. So maybe as units try to do some actions, and they have to do a communication check, the effect is really only maybe a single action period delay. We're only talking 15 seconds. My point is, if there's a loss of communication, in most cases it's going to be reestablished within that action period, 15 seconds. And then I would like to somehow get to, I wonder if a game has done this well. I'm not saying I don't think a game has done this well. Anyways, good a good signals mechanic. But anyways, that's communication. It's got to be included, but it's not really fundamental. Well, it's not fundamental to the outcomes of these actions, but to ignore communication completely doesn't seem right either.